Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, for joining the author's table this morning, and I'm glad that we finally connected.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, Cheryl. Well, let's get started. I like to talk about.
Is
Yeah,
this being recorded?
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yes. You grew up in a very cultural and a lot of diversity, and that was Flushing, New York. Is that correct?
When I was growing up, it wasn't as diverse as it is now.
Okay, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what inspired you or motivated you to start writing, Cheryl?
I just have always been writing.
Yeah.
I, when I was 6 years old, I had a poem published in the PTA newsletter. So the grammar was incorrect. It was kind of about a turkey running away on Thanksgiving who didn't want to get catched.
Oh.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
That's you've
I don't
always.
know where the impulse came from, but it's always been there.
That's awesome. Now, before your first book was published, now what did you find that was the most difficult and the easiest in your book, putting your book together?
You mean my novel, or are you
Well,
talking about just
your
any book?
yeah, your very first one.
Oh God, I can't even remember what my first one
Oh.
was. So, because I've been publishing poetry a long time,
Yes.
including Mimeo chapbooks that started at St. Mark's Poetry Project, in the 70s and 80s when it
Mm-hmm.
was more of a do-it-yourself DIY ethic. And
Oh
that was
yes.
very exciting. I took workshops with Maureen Owen and other writers, and we put together these limited edition Mimeo chapbooks. And so those were some of the first books, I would say. But before that, I wrote for newspapers. I was a sports writer,
Yes.
going back as far as junior high school, and Michigan State. I was a sports writer for newspapers. So I was getting published fairly regularly,
Now,
for a long time.
did you find it pretty easy for you though to do that?
I wouldn't say it was easy, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a learning process. And I even had like editorials in college. It's related to sports, like a Title IX, like when women got the right, to
Oh
have
sure.
equality, supposedly. Um, so those were good. Putting a book together is just it's more complicated because it's a bigger,
That's right.
it's a bigger project, and you have to think about the order. When it's poetry, you have to think about what goes first, what goes last. Is there a theme that connects everything?
Mm-hmm.
I had artists working with me for several of my poetry books. I had illustrations in two of them, and then I had photography in my last poetry book, The Sauna is Full of Maids. I had mostly my own photographs, and I didn't know they were going to be in there. So I just used a cell phone camera. Had I known,
Right.
I
Yes.
might have invested in a better camera, but
Yeah.
uh, so every book is different, and the novel took a really long time
Oh
to
sure.
get in shape for publication.
Now, Cheryl, are you a self-publisher or do you have a publisher?
No, I'm not a self-publisher. I've had publishers all the way through. Small presses,
Mm-hmm.
independent, but all of my books are published with presses.
Did you ever think about being a self-publisher or no?
Um, I don't want to put it down for people who do it, but I do literary writing, and it's not. I don't think it's really good for literary writing. I think for people that do genre writing, it's more appropriate because they have more of a maybe built-in audience and a following, and people want to read the next one in the series. Um, but there are definitely good things about self-publishing, I believe, but I think, you don't get taken as seriously in general. You don't get reviews. Even with small presses, it's very hard to get reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, um, that being said, I think it depends. Like my sister self-published a book because she teaches yoga and nutrition, and for her, since she has a built-in audience, it made sense for her to have a little book, for her to have a book that she could sell
Ab-
along with her.
Absolutely. Yes.
So for that kind of thing, I think it really makes a lot of sense.
Right.
But for literary fiction or poetry, um, I mean, there are a lot of self-published poets certainly, but most people at least try at first to get a publisher.
That's right. Yeah, because you could always start being a self-publisher and then eventually get a publisher. So
Yeah.
it's
I'm not sure about your books. I know you have a number of books. I don't know what
yes,
your situation is.
yeah. I actually it was easier for me to do my self-publishing because since I'm already in the field of graphic arts and advertising and stuff, and I did it all myself.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, and so it was easier for me to do go that route. And then plus two, then I have the control and and then I can market myself, and it was just much easier.
Yeah, no, I understand. And certainly with small presses, you really don't make any money.
Yeah.
So possibly you can make more money with self-publishing, I guess.
Yes.
That's here it's possible.
Now let
But
let
I'm not in it for the money.
right.
I'm not in it for the money.
Right. Yep. Now let's talk about your poetry. Now you have a passion for truth, adventure, events, and beliefs. Now, when you write poetry, do you have like a certain style or a format that you follow?
No.
Okay.
Um, that being said, I do sometimes use forms. I have
Mm-hmm.
lately been interested in the Abecedarian, which is a poem that follows the alphabet. So each line has to start with the next letter of the alphabet. And I've even taught a workshop on that form for this community in the Bronx called Art in the Basin. And I'm hoping to teach more workshops. So sometimes the restriction, whether it's a form, poetic form, or you decide in advance that you want to have repetition
Right.
or you have a style that you want to follow. Sometimes I do those, and sometimes those restrictions are really great. Or other times, like for my last book, I had inspiration from the Finnish poetic epic, the Kalevala, which is, from the 19th century. It was supposedly based on oral history written down, and it's a fantasy story about the search for this mythical, almost like a grail, but it's called
Mm-hmm.
the Sampo, and it has gods and goddesses that are powerful, that are angry, that are happy, that are uh, in search of something. And so I was inspired by some of the mythological themes and also by the way it sounded, the
Right.
sound, even though I read it in translation. So sometimes I do have an inspiration, but for the most part, um, Brad, I just get inspired by many different things, and my poems have different styles and
Right.
different influences, and
I
I
think
like to try new things.
yes, I think that's what makes it unique too. Is that you
Thank
just
you.
you just don't have like a certain style. It's nice to cover all kinds of bases, where you because I believe there's no rules. You can create whatever you want, and there's no right or wrong. It's all from within.
Yeah, but then there's the question of, is it working? So I'm
Hmm.
very it's very important, I think, that writers have writing groups where
Yes,
they get feedback and critique.
that's
So
right.
I have one for my poetry and I have one for my prose. I have two different writing groups I'm in. And sometimes my poem just needs takes a while till it feels like it's done, that it feels
Absolutely, yes,
good.
that's correct.
So it's hard work. I have poems and short stories that have been around for years that are still not quite finished, and
That's
you
what
know, I,
yeah,
they ever will be.
that's what I did with mine. Mine took many years. I would keep everything like in a folder, and it was just timing too. You can work on this stuff for many years, and it did for me. And then eventually, it finally, I said, okay, it's time. We need to bring that out. And
That's great.
yeah. Um, Now let's talk about the sauna is full of maids. Let's talk about that one. Nice. Now the illustration. Now who did that?
Um, okay, so the cover art was from a travel narrative um, in from a long time ago.
Hmm.
It was from the Finland and Nordic Museet. That was actually a travel narrative from 1798 and 99 by Joseph Acerbi. The cover image, and then there's another image inside, like a frontispiece, which shows an old sauna,
Nice.
um, an old wooden sauna. That's also from that. And then the other photographs are almost all my own from my travels, with the exception of a couple that were, taken from stock photography that the
Right.
publisher found. But like I said, I didn't know that this book was going to include photographs. But I'm really glad it did, and everybody that buys it or reads it, or when I just gave a talk at the Gloucester Writers Center in Massachusetts, and they had the projections of the photographs on a huge screen. It was a talk given in an old movie theater.
Oh, oh
So
wow.
the largest image of my photographs that I've ever had projected,
Yeah.
but I just feel like it gives more of a flavor to the poem. If it, and it's not always done that way, but when it can be done that way,
Absolutely, yes.
it's nice.
Now, like in my poem book too, I did the same thing. I did the illustrations for each poem. That was like a connection with the image, so people when they read it, they can sort of relate to it, and it was a nice little touch. Um,
Mine are not always connected directly because they weren't done purposely to be together. So
hmm
basically, it was a conversation. My publisher from Shanti Arts, we had a conversation about which photograph will go with which poem, and then some poems don't have a photograph, and then some photographs don't have a poem. There are just certain
Right.
pages that are just photographs.
Yes. And too, you'll know if like if you wanted to have that connection or you want the reader to sort of just visualize in their own mind. It could be many things too.
True.
Yes, and that's what makes it interesting.
Yes, and I mean that's one of the great things about reading is you do see things for yourself, or
That's right.
you have an experience or an association um, in your own mind.
That's right. Now your next poem book it's called Crater and Tower. Now the I noticed that the cover has the twin towers.
Yeah,
That is
it has Mount St. Helens explosion juxtaposed with the Twin Towers
that's really nice.
because that's what it's about. The crater is Mount St. Helens, and the tower were the Twin Towers. So basically, I was traumatized by 9/11. I live very close to
Mm-hmm.
where it happened, and I couldn't really process it or write about it. And then 9 years after that, in 2010, I went to Mount St. Helens with a group of other writers and scientists to um, to see what Mount St. Helens area in Washington State was like 30 years after the eruption, because the eruption happened in 1980, and it was mind blowing, and it brought up my 9/11 experience. So I wrote these poems that juxtapose or intersperse, uh, you know, I call it, a man-made traumatic,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
disaster with a so-called natural disaster. And in both cases, ash is like one of the common thematics that runs through it, and upheaval of people's lives, and how do we heal? How do we come back from this? So this book also is the first poetry book that was research based because I'm also a professor and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
scholar. I'm a scholar of environmental humanities, environmental justice, and before that, travel writing. So I had some grants to go to the Pacific Northwest and work in archives and look up actual records of the Mount St. Helens eruption, and not only news articles, but folklore, geological surveys, Native American,
Oh yeah.
local Native American tradition and records. And then I also had access to the Washington State Archives, where Dixie Lee Ray was the governor of Washington, and I got to read her files, and I wrote a whole poem based on letters that people wrote to her. Dear Governor Ray is the poem, and they had all these ideas about how you should handle the aftermath of the eruption, and including putting people in jail who went in the red zone when they weren't supposed to,
Mm-hmm.
and selling the ash and making money off of it, which indeed did happen.
Mm.
So it was a very rich experience for me to write poems based on research.
Now with all the like for that example, now do you have like a journal when you like write down all your notes or anything? You keep like a daily log.
Oh yeah, I always, and I tell my students this. I'm teaching creative writing this semester. I often do. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I skip it. But I tell them I write everything down first, and pen and paper in a notebook, either daily journaling or just I always write things down first.
Mm-hmm.
I always, and when you do archival research, I write down everything. And this was before, when I was there, we weren't as quite as technologically advanced as we are now. Like now you can put everything in clouds. And, in those days I had to scan it like from documents. I had to, they would allow me to scan or photocopy a certain number of archival materials. And then I had to like get the scan into a file in my computer. And,
Oh.
so I
Mm-hmm.
saved a lot of materials, but then I just wrote down a lot of things. Um, and I did do citations for some of the poems, which is unusual in creative writing to give scholarly citations, which I do in all my academic writing, but usually you don't have to do that in creative writing. But for that book, I did. By the way, that book unfortunately went out of print because it was a small press, Duck Lake Books, and the publisher, something happened during the pandemic, and he just disappeared off the grid.
Oh
And
boy.
but I'm lucky that Shanti Arts, my publisher, my current poetry publisher in Maine, is going to do a second edition of Crater and
Oh
Tower. So
great.
I'm excited. I'm going to add some new poems. And some of the poems in the book are not about the two disasters. Some are just about everyday life because I felt like, so the middle section of the book
Yes.
is not as heavy, I would say. It's more about just life and
Life.
has humor. And I always like humor. Humor is important for me in all my writing.
I think
So
I think for everybody, really. We all need that.
we do, but not every writer I find incorporates enough humor.
Yeah,
You
that's true.
may
That's
like to laugh in life, but somehow it's not something that everybody puts into their writing.
right. Now, when you do your research, Cheryl, do you also I know you do a lot of note taking in that though, but like photography, like you'll do journal and then you'll do the photography and just keep those all together, like on a like per date or per location, or how do you?
No, I didn't. I wasn't that organized at all. So
Okay.
when I did the research for the Crater and Tower book, I didn't really do photography. Um, I mean, I had photocopies.
Yes.
I printed. I took home certain numbers of pages. Some were files, archival files. So I did a mix of things. I didn't do a lot of photography for that. But at Mount St. Helens, when I was there, I did a ton of photography. But ironically enough, my camera got stolen when I got back to Portland. I went to a beer festival and I put down my camera. That was the end of my camera. But another writer in the group, Simmons Bunting, who publishes Terrain, an online environmental creative writing journal, he was he shared some of his photos with me, and I credited him, of course. So
Hmm.
that book doesn't have photographs, but I've given talks and I've given readings. And when we were during the pandemic on lockdown, when I give readings, I would be able to show photographs. This is one of the good things about Zoom
That's right.
events. You can share your screen and you can show visuals
That's
very
right.
easily. So, I use some of his pictures, and then I use, some stock photography.
Yes.
Um, and maybe I did manage to have a few of them that I didn't lose, but those were the days before like everything went into a cloud.
Right. Yes. I,
Because now.
I remember those days too. Now your third poem book. Now that's Make It Funny, Make It Last.
That's a chapbook, and that was actually before the other two, so you don't
Okay.
have the order correct. So The Sound is Full of Maids is my most recent poetry book, and that was published in 2021. Make It Funny, Make It Last, I think was published in either 2016 or 17. It's a chapbook from Belladonna, which
Oh,
is a really great feminist poetic collective in Brooklyn, and they publish a real wide, diverse range of writers. And more experimental in its form. And they publish these, they call them chaplets. So that was what they call a chaplet. So it's a smaller than a full book of poems. But yes, and that was just that had poems on different themes. It wasn't unified in any one theme, but it did have a section of poems that eventually went into Crater and Tower. You
oh,
know, so, so
nice, excellent. Now I find your next book very interesting. Now it's called Black and White Women's Travel Narratives, Antebellum, and Explorations. I thought that was pretty interesting.
So again, that's not my next book. That was very earlier.
Oh, very okay. I
Yeah,
apologize.
so
Okay.
that one was my, it started as my PhD dissertation, and
Okay.
it became a book in 2004. It was published by University Press of Florida, and that
Mm-hmm.
was essentially an academic book about Black women travelers in the antebellum period who were free, who were not slave, who were able to travel and write about their travels. And I was one of the first person to write on some of these women. In those days, there wasn't a lot of
Right.
material. I had to do a lot of archival research by hand because in those days, not things weren't online.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that book. Um, uh, and unfortunately, that book has gone out of print.
Hmm.
But Gail, Gail is going to bought one of the chapters to put on their database. So students and researchers will be able to access at least some of it on online resources. But maybe maybe another publisher will want to republish it. I think it's a groundbreaking book. But that was that came out of my dissertation. And
Now that was like during the before the Civil War. Is that right? Around that time?
yeah, the writers that I focus on
Yes.
are before the Civil War, so it's the 1840s and 1850s, and
Mm-hmm.
two of the writers are Black women that most people never heard of. The third one is Margaret Fuller, who was a transcendentalist friend of Ralph Waldo Emerson. She's quite well known early feminist,
Yeah.
but she also wrote travel. She wrote a travel narrative going to what was then considered the West. It was the Great Lakes region, and that book was called Summer on the Lakes. And so I focused on that, but I connected it to the writing by the two African American women. Well, actually, one was African American and one is Afro Jamaican, Mary Seacole and Nancy Prince. And I looked at how travel writing was really a hybrid form that enabled women to criticize all the wrongs of society. So that was basically my uniting thesis. But of course, uh, the Black women had it so much harder, and
Oh,
they were at
sure.
risk to travel and to and to say that they had the right to travel. They couldn't say, I want to go and have an adventure.
Right.
Mary Seacole's book was called Adventures of Mrs. Seacole, but she went to the Crimean War. Her book, she was turned down by Florence Nightingale, and she went anyway. So she's really an amazing
Yes.
person,
Mm-hmm.
groundbreaking person, and so is Nancy Prince. And they wrote in such different styles. So that was interesting aspect of that book, how to bring together a study of these three women who are very different, who wrote in very different styles, had very different backgrounds. And some of the information I didn't know and I couldn't find, so I had to do speculation. I
Yes.
had to think, here's what I think must have gone on. But, some of it I couldn't prove for sure. But yeah, that book took a long time. And, it was definitely an experience to write a scholarly study
Oh,
in that
yes.
book.
Now let's talk about A Stranger in the Village. Now that sounds very interesting too.
That was related to Black and White women's travel narratives.
Mm-hmm.
That's a collection of Black travel literature with Farah Griffin, who's a renowned African American scholar at Columbia. When we collaborated, she was at UPenn, and we edited that book. So that's an edited collection of well-known African American writers who traveled, and includes like James Baldwin and uh, June Jordan and many, many other. Martin Luther King, we managed to get the rights to something he wrote. It includes many Black intellectuals and leaders, and it's focused on where they traveled. So uh, but at the time there wasn't a lot of emphasis on travel by Black people, and on how what the restrictions were, how they overcame the restrictions, uh, what they found when they traveled, they how they talked about it. Like Matthew Hansen went to the Arctic. He was a Black Arctic traveler. Many people didn't know,
Hmm.
that there was an African American on one of the polar expeditions. So we really covered a lot of different people in that book, and that's Beacon Press, and they keep all their books in print, which is really
Oh
nice.
yes. I
Um,
yeah. It's a shame though that there's so much literally work that is lost because of that. And it's a shame because there's. I always say everybody has a story to tell. And I think that the writings that were lost, it's just a shame because I think everybody needs to read that.
Well, so that's why we dug out these writings. A lot of
Yes.
them were obscure, and so that's what good research can do.
Mm-hmm.
So Farrah Griffin and I discussed which writers should go in here. How do we get the rights to their material?
Mm-hmm.
Some were like missionaries. I focused a lot on the early ones from the 19th century, since I became aware of a lot of these travel narratives when I was doing research for my book. I became aware of a lot of people that were writing about travels. I mean, some were because of missionary work, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but there were other conditions under which Black people were writing about their experience.
Right.
Quite a few of the women were evangelical, like ministers, and there's a couple of famous ones. Joanna Lee is one of the famous ones. Mariah Stewart is one of the famous ones. So, those women are getting well known, but still many people have never heard of them.
Right.
So that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to put together a collection that showed the range. And then Farah focused a little more on the later ones, on the more recent ones. But that book came out, in the late 90s. So already it's an older book. And since then, other people have done, other great work on these topics. And, that's the thing.
But it's wonderful that you and your team has done that though. So
Yeah, no, it was great to do it, but we didn't. I felt it too bad we didn't publicize the book more. We didn't go out and do like talks and signings, and I think we could have. We were both really busy, and you know, these days many publishers just don't
mm,
have the money for that.
right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so we definitely didn't do that much to publicize the book at the time when it
Right.
came.
Let's talk about off the yoga mat.
Okay, now that's the most recent
Yeah.
one. And that's my first novel. So
Yes.
it's
Yes,
different
it
from
is.
books. Have you read it?
No, I have not. No.
Okay. Okay. Because it's always better if the interviewer has read the interviewee's stuff, and they can ask very
Right. Right.
specific
Yes.
questions.
Yes. No, I have not read it.
Okay. So what would you like to know?
Well, let's start from like how you started it and the reason why.
I started it a long time ago, and I there are three characters. For people that have never heard of it, it's about three characters turning 40. So I call it a coming of middle age novel. Even though now 40 seems very young to me,
Yes.
uh, uh, 40 is
Tell me about
does feel like an important time in your life. You know, where you feel like you're not that young anymore. You're not old, but you're not young.
it. Right. Right. Right.
So, how it's coming of middle age, but it's three characters who find like their lives have been unraveling and they haven't achieved the things they always wanted to. Um, so, the male character, Nate, is a graduate student. He's been in graduate school forever. He has he wants to write his dissertation on jealousy, actually, from a perspective of sort of psychology, but also literature and also Darwin. Um, but his dissertation advisor doesn't like what he's doing and is not letting him graduate. So Nate is turning 40 and he's still living, off his parents' money. And he has a tiny apartment in the East Village in New York City. And his girlfriend is another major character, Nora. And she wants to have a baby because when women are approaching 40, sometimes that becomes a big issue for them. Am I going to have children or not? I'm getting kind of up there in age. Yeah. Nowadays, women can freeze their eggs, but in those days, women could not do that. So she breaks up with Nate because he's not ready, and she ends up going to Finland to work for Nokia because Nokia was a huge success in the 90s. It was the largest and very thriving cell phone company before smartphones came out, and it's based in
Mm-hmm.
Finland. And I wanted to get Finland into the novel because I had, done a Fulbright professorship there, and I wanted to find a way to write about it. And then the third character is Nate's yoga teacher, Lulu Baconcourt, and she's from New Orleans. She's mixed race, and she's struggling with nightmares of something that happened to her in her childhood, and she's not sure of the details. So she kind of wants to get to the bottom of that. So, so I have these three characters. They all are having challenges in their lives, as we all do, and so I wrote it from three different alternating perspectives. So the chapters alternate between those three characters. And I had the idea, these characters came to me for different reasons, and they're all exploring a different aspect of life that I wanted to look at. And I kept detailed notebooks and developed their character that way so I would know who they are, what their interests are, what their personality is. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can develop characters, but
Right.
none of them are based on anyone in particular, except they all have aspects. Each one has a little bit of myself, I would say, but then they're also not me totally, and a lot of it is made up. And so it was just a long process when you have three narrative alternating third person.
Right.
It's
Hmm.
hard to put it together. It's hard to figure out how to have the plot moving. So actually, I took workshops, and I worked at one point. I did work with a writing coach who helped me with the pacing, as they call in fiction. Pacing is really important, like how you tell the story, how you keep the reader interested.
Yes.
But I think I did a good job in the end. Yeah, because people tell me it's a page turner, that once they start off the yoga mat, they can't stop, that they're very involved in the characters' lives. They want to know what happens. So
It's a good
that
feeling,
took,
isn't it?
that took a lot of work, and it didn't come easy. And I could have given up, and I almost gave up. In fact, I've written an essay on how I published off the yoga mat um, for this place called Authors Publish. It's an online you know, electronic resource that publishes places to send your work, and um, they also publish articles on how people publish their debut novels in different ways.
Okay.
And so I wrote about how I did it and all this the times I almost quit.
Hmm.
All the times just what it wasn't coming together, and how I had to put it aside, and how I had to get new readers to give me input, and
Was
because
that
you can't keep asking the same people to give you
yeah,
feedback.
was that writer's block?
No, it's not
Okay.
writer's block. I don't really experience writer's block as a block. It's more like you're stuck with something. You're stuck. So writer's block is actually you're facing some difficulties in what you're writing. I'm going through one right now in the next fiction thing I'm writing. I'm
Oh,
having
okay.
So it's not a block. It's just I'm doing a revision of the first draft. So it took me 2 years to finish the first draft, and now I'm on a revision, and I'm just in a chapter where I need to make changes, and I'm not sure yet how and what. I have some new, like if you change something in one chapter, it throws off everything else.
Right.
That's
Yes. Yes.
because so then you have to rearrange the new material, and sometimes you have to cut it, sometimes you have to add stuff, sometimes you have to put it somewhere else. So I'm going through that process, and that's very unpleasant.
Yes, it is. Yes. And
The first draft of writing is ecstatic when you have no rules, when you're just getting the first thing down. That's like the happiest time.
because
But once,
yeah, yeah,
go
because
ahead.
those those creative juices are just flowing, so it's easy just to write it down. And but like you said though, it's when you go back and fine tune it, that's where you really start focusing.
Well,
And
and that's where the real writing happens.
yes,
That all writing is rewriting, and Hemingway would write his stories like 300 times. Um, so that's where it's a really hard work. You still have moments of pleasure and wonder, but you also have really hard and difficult and um,
yes, yes.
times.
Now
So
what?
that's why I tell people, my students, if you don't have to write, I don't recommend it. If you don't feel that you have to write, then I just think it's a real hard thing to do. There's lots of
Yes.
rejection, there's lots of struggle, but I'm one of these people that has to do it. I don't feel that I'm myself if I don't do it. So
Well, I'm glad that you are. And thank you so much for sharing that too, Cheryl. You know,
What do you think? Do you agree with that? I mean, I
yeah,
think, if you're just doing it for the money or
no,
for fame, so-called 15 minutes of fame,
no, you
or
have
whatever.
no. I agree. You have to do it internally. You have to do it because you want to, and like anything, like any profession, you're not going to do it. Oh yeah, I'm going to make all this money, but be miserable. You have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you have to believe in it and you have to do what you're good at. I mean,
That's right.
unfortunately, I don't think I'm very good at commercial kinds of writing or genre writing, like romance or horror or mystery writing, which, those the people that can do that, that can fit that formula and just churn out books, good for them.
Right.
It's great that they can do that, but I can't do that. And I'm just not even that interested in doing that.
Well,
So
and that's a good thing because your focus and your talents are exactly what you're doing, and I think you
I
should.
think so.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you.
And also because I'm a poet, all my writing has to be beautiful. All the language is what matters to me more than anything. So when I read a book, and if it's not beautifully written and it's not like a high level of intellectually
Yes.
stimulating me, I'm not interested. That's why I can't read mass market books. They're
Okay.
just not well written, a lot of them. I
Yes.
mean, I shouldn't say that none of them are, but a lot of them are not. Um, that being said, there are some writers that can do both. Like, Stephen King
Right.
I don't really read Stephen King, but he's a strong writer. He's a good writer and he's a bestseller.
That's
So
right.
hats off. Hats off to him.
That's right. Now, as a author, now what do you find that is the most challenging, or maybe the easiest for you?
Which one?
How about let's start with the hardest
In
as an
long
author.
running?
Yeah, just
Well, it's different because I write, as I've told you, I write in at least three genres.
right.
So I write nonfiction, mainly scholarly or academic articles, although I have some nonfiction essays that are more like creative nonfiction, like personal essays. I have published a few of those, and
Mm-hmm.
I am interested in possibly doing more of those. And I have that essay on how I wrote my book. So I do have those. Then I have poetry, and then I have fiction. And then in addition to novel, I also write flash fiction, which is very short fiction that's under 1,000 words. And that's a totally different way of writing than writing long fiction. And then I also write traditional short stories, like,
You
that
do
are
it all.
somewhat.
You do it all,
No, I
Cheryl.
don't do drama,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I thought about, and maybe when I retire, which is going to happen pretty soon, I may try to do screenplay because a lot of people have told me Off the Yoga Mat would make a good movie, and I think it would. But I haven't done dramatic writing, so that's the one form that I really haven't done at all.
You think
The
you'll?
hardest thing
Mm-hmm.
is the hardest thing is getting it right, is getting it to the level that you feel is the best you can do. And that's um, that's really powerful. And that, like, if you came back and you'd read it, you'd say, you know what, I can't believe I wrote that.
Yeah.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that's you don't always achieve that. Sometimes you go back and look at some of your stuff and you feel like, okay, it's all right, but it's not my best thing, or I should have done something different, or I think a lot of times you're always second guessing
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
That's right.
It's all hard. It's None of it is easy, except I thank my lucky stars that I have imagination, and that I have
That's right.
creativity, and that I have ideas. That I'm so thankful for, that I don't seem to run out of ideas. I mean, I do wonder if I'll be able to write another long fictional work or another long, academic book. Probably not. I don't really feel motivated to do that. So right now, I'm working more on novellas, which are shorter than novels. They don't have as much marketability, but that's that seems to be a form that it's between a novel and between a short story is a novella. So about between 20 between 20,000 and 40,000 words, let's say. And then anything over that is already more like a novel.
Okay. Now, do you have like a website, Cheryl? That
I have a website, CherylJFish.com.
fantastic. Uh, Now, when is your next event, Cheryl?
Um,
Like a book signing
okay,
event or?
yeah. So I just finished a lot of events. My next ones are going to be early in 2024. I'll have a reading coming up in a bookstore on the Lower East Side of New York. And I'm working with one of the New York Public Library branches to probably do an event with them. And so I have a couple things in the works right now.
Very good.
Um, but yeah, I just came from a period of doing a lot of them, so I'm in a slightly quieter period now.
Yeah. Now, do you find or what is the easiest like your method? Like when you have a book signing event, what how do you promote it?
Um, Promoting on social media, and I send emails to large numbers of people that I think might be interested. And then depends where it is. Like I did a book tour in Michigan in June, and I didn't have that many connections there. So I collaborated with another writer, and she she was the one responsible, and the people that she knew brought out a lot of our audience came from local connections. So the event I just did in Gloucester, Massachusetts, they publicize it among the local people and writers and friends of the center, and that's where most of the people came from. So so that's what's the hard thing is if you don't have personal connections in certain places, it's
Hmm.
harder to get an audience because newspapers don't announce these things anymore. People don't necessarily come out to live events for writers they don't know. They come out for the big name writers.
Right.
That's it.
Yes.
But and also it's so competitive. There are so many writers now that do events on Zoom, you know, do virtual events, in-person events. There's just a million different things
A lot
that
of
you're competing,
competition.
especially in big areas like in New York City. Like
Right.
today, there are probably 5 or 10 events I could go to. Um, and then a couple of other things I'm doing are to support other writers. I believe it's very important that we be good citizens in the writing world and help each other.
Absolutely right.
Um, so I'm actually doing an interview for Bomb magazine. I don't know if you know BOMB.
Mm.
It's a really great magazine in print and online that celebrates the arts in all forms. And it always one of the things it does is it has interviews between um, different artists. So one artist interviews another artist either in the same genre or in a different one. And I've subscribed for a while and loved it. And so um, I'm going to be interviewing Bonnie Jo Campbell, who has her third novel, The Waters, is coming out in January with Norton, and I'm doing an interview with her that's going to appear. I'm not sure when. So we are working on that interview, which is not like ours here. It's not
Yeah.
an online one; it's a print one. So we've been sending back and forth Q&A stuff, and then probably next year, I'm going to be taking over a reading series that was run by some other writers. And that's going to be focusing on prose, probably fiction and memoir. And not sure yet where it's going to be, but I'm going to be doing that with another writer as well. And
Excellent.
that would be supporting other writers and having them give readings.
I think that's very important that we do that.
I agree.
Yeah, because
And
it's
thank
so
you for
critical.
doing this because you're giving me an opportunity to reach other people
That is
through
right. And I
your
and I think too, you're absolutely right about we all need to be together. You know, we all need to help each other and just get our names out there and just and there's it's competition, yes, but at the same time, be friendly and nice about it.
definitely.
You know.
And I'm also doing an event this week. It's more related to my academic research, but it's about it's about environmental art.
Hmm.
It's about environmental art that's from the polar regions, so Antarctica and the Arctic, and it's a book by Lisa Bloom looking at climate change and challenges to climate change through radical artists and performing artists. And we're giving a talk it's an online talk through Helsinki Environmental Humanities Month, because I have an affiliation with the University of Helsinki, as well as CUNY. And so that's going to be an online event this Wednesday with Lisa. And then one of the people who contributed to her book, Judith Hersko, is going to do a short performance piece.
Nice.
So that should be fun. So I do things like that. I organize events, and I'm also a reader for the journal Ecoscene, which is an academic journal out of Cappadocia in Turkey. But I'm one of the creative writing editors. So myself and another person, Darren Fleet, we are the readers for the submissions related to, environmental humanities, the relationship between human and non-human
Mm-hmm.
life. So we get poetry, fiction, essays sent to us. So that's a volunteer position. So it's another way of giving back and
That's
help
right.
and stewarding other people and other writers
You're
into.
a very busy woman, Cheryl.
I'm a very busy woman.
Yes, you are, and that's wonderful that you are though too. But like you said, when you retire, we'll see, right?
Now, when I retire, I want to have a new chapter. I want to do more work,
Yep.
because then I won't be teaching as much full time. So I still want to possibly teach and edit and uh, do workshops. And so, anyone watching this, if you want to hire me,
That's right.
I'll be available. I'll
Yeah.
be available in about a year. I'll be available,
So,
and I'm very skilled, experienced
yes,
in
you
many
are.
areas.
And I think I have to say congratulations on all the work that you're doing. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. I mean, you've been there, done that, and like your next chapter. I mean, who knows? I mean, the sky's the limit.
I know, and I think one of the great things is that we don't always know what's the next chapter. I
Right.
mean, I never would have guessed that I would have written two books involving Finland. That wasn't in my background at all. I'm not Finnish. Um, but, I ended up there on a Fulbright because I had a young child at the time and they had good schools and they liked my research and it just was a good fit. And
Yeah.
then I kept coming back and I ended up getting inspired to write these books. So I think a lot of times you don't know where your next idea is going to come from, and
A-
that's exciting.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. You just never know. You take each day at a time and you take advantage of it.
So
A-
your background is in graphic design.
Advertising, yes.
Okay.
I've been doing that for, oh my gosh, my whole life, really.
How did you get into doing this podcast about writing?
Well, I actually I started in April.
So it's new. It's really
Yes,
new.
yes, and for a while I'm thinking, what can I do to help other authors? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to start doing research on podcasts and start looking at different options, trying different softwares. I did all that, and then I thought, well, because I go to the different book signing events, and then I get their names and their emails,
Really?
and they
Right?
start networking, and next thing you know it, I said I'm going to start it, and then in April was my first time,
Where
and
are you located?
I'm in Florida,
Oh, where in Florida?
Orlando.
Okay, because I'm going to Florida soon to visit my mother in West Palm Beach.
Ah, nice.
Well, maybe in the future we can do some Florida events.
Of course, absolutely.
Seriously, I haven't hit the Florida market yet.
Oh, well, we're open. We're ready for you.
I know. And yoga, is one of my main characters, a yoga teacher, and so many people do yoga
Oh, of course.
and are interested in how that can help us move
Yep,
through life in not only physical but emotional. And
that's right.
so kind of the novel is about how it's still possible to change and grow even as you get older. So it's kind of about how to age gracefully
Mm-hmm.
but still screw up, because we all screw up continually and we're
Yeah.
not perfect. And
Yep.
so I feel like, I think a lot of people would enjoy reading my book. And
Of
I
course.
haven't really done book clubs yet. I did one book club, but it would be fun to be like a guest in people's book clubs and things like that would be
That's
a
right.
lot of fun. Yeah.
I always say, live and learn. Just don't live. You know,
Absolutely. Fantastic.
because
Yeah.
God gave us a mind. Let's use it. You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much out there that we can do for the good,
Yeah.
and
We
I,
won't get political now, but I do get disturbed when people try to tell us what books we can't teach, can and can't teach.
oh yeah, I know, I'm,
Yeah. That's a difficult thing you're dealing with in Florida and in other places,
oh,
you
of
know.
course, I mean, it's, yeah, you, like you said, we can talk about all kinds of different things, but yeah,
Yeah,
well,
that's a good one.
yeah, well,
Okay.
Cheryl, I thank you so much for taking the time today, and I congratulate you on all your efforts, and thank you again. You're a superb woman,
Thank you,
and
Brad, for
yeah,
having me and for putting this out there to a whole new group of people. And
thank you.
they can contact me through my website. There's a page where people can contact me, and I enjoy hearing
Yes.
from people.
And
So
I think, the biggest thing is networking. We need to, put our feelers out there, and just reach as many people as we can, and
that's right. And you never know who you're going to reach, and you never know how people are going to react. And it's just that's one of the most satisfying things about putting out books into the world. It's to connect with people and readers.
absolutely right,
That's
Cheryl.
all we want, really. That's what it's about.
That's right. And that smile.
Thank you.
Of course. Well,
Okay.
yes, thank you, and you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you, Cheryl. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye bye.